Fred Astaire lived his entire life trying to seem flawless on film. Every smile, every bow tie, and every step was perfect. Then, in 2025, a lost 1950 photograph surfaced online. It quickly became viral. Fred appears worn out, damaged, and on the verge of giving up. It's heartbreaking, according to fans. The great surprise, however, was when they looked at the back of the picture. No one was supposed to see what Fred had written in pencil. Behind all that charm, he was actually hurting, as those words make clear. The world would be shocked to learn the Dancing King's secret. On May 10, 1899, Fred Astaire was born in Omaha, Nebraska. Frederick Asteritz was actually his name. In 1893, Fritz, his father, fled Austria for the United States in search of a better life. He made barely enough money selling beer to get by. Anne, Fred's mother, was a German immigrant who supported her family by teaching piano. She became aware of anything unique when Fred was just 3 years old. He was imitating his older sister Adele's dance moves. Their entire lives would be shaped by her notion that show business could be their means of escaping poverty. When Fred was 4 years old in 1903, he began dancing informally while observing Adele. Fred followed her to Omaha, where she started taking classes at the Chambers Dance Academy. After Fritz lost his work, the family relocated to New York City in 1905, 2 years later. Their debt was overwhelming them. They owed more than $200. Anne persisted, nevertheless. She signed up for dance classes for both of her kids. Additionally, by 1906, Fred and Adele were earning $50 per show from their modest vaudeville acts. Even though Fred was only 7 years old, he was dancing for up to 12 hours every day. Back then, there were no laws protecting children. Even though they had very little, Anne persevered and handled everything. In order to enhance their performance, Fred also learned to play the clarinet, accordion, and piano. When the siblings were 7 years old, they were known as the Astaires. They began playing up to 20 shows a week while touring the Midwest. The family benefited greatly from their income of about $150 each contract. Fred practiced 8 hours a day, putting in a tremendous amount of effort. He studied tap and ballroom and was influenced by dancers such as Bill Bojangles Robinson. However, they adopted fictitious names, since in some regions, children under the age of 14 were not permitted on stage. Fred played the role of Freddie Austin. The audience adored them when they performed at the Orpheum Theater in Omaha in 1908. They were lavished with flowers and paid $150 a week. However, life remained difficult. Adele began to outgrow Fred in height, and by 1912, the disparity was too obvious on stage. They paused for 2 years. When Fred was 10 years old in 1909, a frightening incident occurred. During a performance in Keyport, New Jersey, he froze. It was stage fright. That incident, he later claimed, plagued him for decades. Because he was constantly worried, Adele made fun of him by referring to him as the groaning Minnie. However, Fred used that fear as motivation. He kept practicing until he was flawless. Adele was 16, and Fred was 13 by 1912. With fresh enthusiasm, they resumed their performances, crafting more sophisticated routines influenced by Vernon and Irene Castle. They starred in a performance called Stop Flirting after relocating to England in 1923 for better chances. While battle memories continued to reverberate throughout London, Fred acquired new abilities during that period. Fred lost his father to cancer in 1924. Despite the challenging year, he persisted. The Prince of Wales even learned tap dancing from Adele, and he attended 10 of their performances. In 1917, they made a significant breakthrough in America. The patriotic revue Over the Top, which debuted on November 28, 1917, featured them. Their weekly salary was $250, or more than $6,000 in today's currency. Their rehearsals were extended into the night by Fred. Their commitment was noted by critics, who referred to their performance as one of the show's highlights. Additionally, it was Fred's first time using a full-page advertisement in Variety magazine to promote himself. That gamble paid well. They starred in Judy and The Bunch in 1922. Though the Astaires stood out, the show itself wasn't highly received. Adele had met a British aristocrat in London named Lord Charles Cavendish, with whom she had secretly begun a romantic relationship. She was followed by gossip publications that took pictures and made references to a royal match. Every time Adele went on a covert date, Fred had to put in more effort to keep the charade going. Tensions were growing during the show's brief 63 performances. Lady Be Good followed in 1924. It was a huge success when it debuted on December Honest. The music was composed by the Gershwin brothers, and Fred danced so enthusiastically that he needed a bucket of water off stage to cool down. Funny Face first appeared in 1927. It was contemporary and wild. For the first time, Fred combined tap and jazz in a novel style while sporting a top hat and tails. After receiving negative reviews in Philadelphia, the show's name was changed from Smarty due to issues during rehearsals. However, it ran for 244 performances after opening on November 2020, and then another 263 in London. The media paid less attention to the dance and more attention to Adele's developing romance with Cavendish. Everyone thought there was going to be a wedding. The Bandwagon was their final performance together in 1931. On June 3rd, it opened. The slow, gloomy dance performance, performed to Dancing in the Dark, was particularly well received by the critics. Behind the scenes, however, Adele had already decided. She would marry Cavendish and never be seen on stage again. She was certain, despite Fred's attempts to convince her otherwise. They took down their last curtain on March 5, 1932. They had ceased dancing together after 27 years. At age 32, Fred was the only person on stage. Shortly thereafter, Fred made a bold move. For a screen test, he took a plane to Hollywood. In 1933, RKO completed a report on him on July 26. It was embarrassing. Balding, can't act, slightly photogenic, dances a little. The placards were redesigned to read, "Introducing Fred Astaire." However, the triumph was accompanied with suffering. Fred made 105 takes of a dance sequence in the same movie on September 12, 1933. It lasted only 40 seconds. It cost hundreds of dollars for each take. The budget was exceeded by $27,000. He began to be labeled as problematic by studio bosses, and subsequent studios used this label to offer him lower salary. At that point, however, Fred established his reputation for control, perfection, and a relentless pursuit of the best tape. In 1934, Fred got into a heated argument about clothing while filming The Gay Divorce. He detested the movement of Ginger Rogers' clothing. It resembled a flying bedsheet, he claimed. He rejected 17 outfits before he found one that met his requirements. He even outlawed sequins larger than a specific size. Despite this, the film generated $1.8 million, a $800,000 budget, sparing the studio a significant loss. Rogers was given equal credit at last, but Fred had to approve every costume after that. In 1935, Top Hat followed. A sequence involving dancing on a rotating ceiling was in Fred's dream. A steel turntable was used to construct the set, but it jammed during testing, breaking Ginger Rogers' foot. For 18 days, production was halted. There were rumors that the set had been sabotaged. Fred had created enemies with his demands. It increased stress in an already tense situation, even though no one proved anything. Rogers returned with an ankle brace and dancing. Because her shoes were always losing feathers, the crew made fun of her by calling her Chicken Little. During swing time in 1936, Fred got into a fight with the director about a song. Rather than dubbing it, he preferred to sing it live. He stated he would resign if they dubbed it. The studio complied. After beginning his career as a Broadway dancer, Fred Astaire unexpectedly rose to prominence in the film industry. It all started in 1933 when he was given third billing in the movie Flying Down to Rio. However, everything changed after he danced with Ginger Rogers. Together, they produced 9 musicals in just 6 years, 6 of which went on to become RKO's highest-grossing productions. When the studio gave him 10% of the earnings as an incentive, he finally stopped worrying about being associated with someone else's performance. However, 1937 was not a happy year for long. Shall We Dance, which was released in May, featured 9 brand new songs written by George and Ira Gershwin. George Gershwin passed away 9 weeks later after collapsing due to a brain tumor. He was just 38. His last gift to the world were the songs from that movie. He had spent weeks honing the line, "They can't take that away from me." However, he was unable to complete rehearsals after learning of Gershwin's operation. He simply couldn't continue, he wrote to his agent. For a time, the studio had to halt all operations. To spare a celebrity further suffering, the director decided not to retake the song after it was over. Even rare color video of a man going back and forth with his head in his hands and appearing heartbroken in between takes may be found. He starred in the Vernon and Irene Castle romance 2 years later, in 1939. Irene Castle disliked Ginger Rogers' appearance in real life, but RKO wanted it to be a serious biography. Instead of Ginger's typical wavy hair, she insisted that she wear bobbed wigs. The studio had to pay an additional $8,000 for that delay. Meanwhile, speculations about Astaire and the 53-year-old actress who played their manager, Edna Mae Oliver, were spread by Gossip magazine. Although the allegations were untrue, they were so persistent that RKO had to inform reporters that Oliver, who suffers from arthritis, seldom ever leaves her home. Unfortunately, Oliver's final movie before her death in 1942 was this one as well. The film did well at the box office, although it fell well short of their previous successes. With Broadway Melody of 1940, Astaire had a new challenge at MGM, Dancing with Eleanor Powell. It cost the studio $1. Over $120,000 was spent solely to construct a massive mirrored set for their main dance routine, Begin the Begin, out of the $6 million spent on the film. Although early versions were significantly lengthier, it was shot in a single take that lasted more than 4 minutes. Powell's solo was cut short by Astaire because the audience applauded too soon before he even made his appearance. He felt uneasy about that. He was smoking 2 packs of Camels a day during rehearsals, which was significantly more than normal for him. In contrast, Powell broke 3 sets of tap shoes. To ensure that air didn't take center stage, MGM subtly shifted some of his other scheduled performances to another actor, George Murphy, despite the fact that critics praised the dance. Then, in 1942, Air and Columbia Pictures collaborated on the Rita Worth film You Were Never Lovelier. Xavier Cugat's band joined the studio after he insisted that they try Latin music. However, the studio made sure they stood out in the movie's posters. Additionally, censors cut out a kiss scene and shortened the movie by 2 minutes when it was released in Argentina. Nevertheless, it was a success, bringing in $2.2 million in the U.S. alone, and making Hworth his most lucrative partner after Ginger. By 1945, Air was ready for a change. With Yolanda and the Thief, an odd dreamlike film, he took a major chance. In addition to having floating staircases and multicolored clouds, it cost more than $2.3 million to create, double what he typically spent. However, it was unsuccessful. The film lost the company $1 million and barely made $1.5 million. It was dubbed a staircase Waterloo by Variety magazine. In March 1946, feeling exhausted and ashamed, he announced his retirement from cinema dance. Instead, he intended to concentrate on starting a chain of dancing studios. Given that he had invested $200,000 of his personal funds in the movie, fans believed he was going bankrupt. When MGM's financial records were made public in 1974, the number proved to be accurate. Hollywood was surprised by his abrupt departure. He even received a message from Gene Kelly, wondering if it was safe to dance once more. However, that retirement was short-lived. Gene Kelly had to leave the Easter Parade in 1948 after suffering an injury while playing volleyball. Filming was only a few weeks away, but a gaze came back to save the film. Judy Garland expressed her relief, saying he put her at rest. Her health prevented her from working on their next project. Thus, they only made that one movie together. Nevertheless, the filming proceeded quickly. Because Astaire likes to film dances in a single take, it only took 3 months. A brilliant camera trick with varying speeds on the staircase was utilized in one of the scenes, stepping out with my baby. This was a very difficult technique to execute in the 1940s, but it worked brilliantly and helped restart a career in stairs. Although Judy Garland was missing too many days in 1949, MGM still intended to create the Barclays of Broadway. After letting her go, the studio contacted Ginger Rogers, who was peacefully residing in Oregon. She put an end to the speculations that they had broken up by saying that she would love to work with the Astaire once more. In order to accommodate Rogers' style, they swiftly revised the screenplay, added a Gershwin song, and modified the dances. 6 weeks later, they were on the set. It was a stunning homage to the black and white masterpieces they created in the 1930s and became their sole color film together. Then, in 1951, Astaire performed an apparently magical act. Later, when civil rights groups began picketing outside his Broadway show in 1963, Fred tried to make amends by donating to a civil rights organization and narrating a television special about black dancers. In a 1970 interview, he described the Miami decision as his darkest moment, saying that they should have stomped out segregation, not danced around it. When his horse, Hi-Hat, lost poorly at the Santa Anita Derby in 1944, Fred pushed more money into racing, putting his faith in a gambler named Nick the Greek. However, travel restrictions during the war left the horses stranded, and by 1946, his money was running out. After the IRS discovered $400,000 in a phony Cayman Islands business in 1947 and began investigating tax evasion charges, Fred quietly settled the case by selling his Rolls-Royce For $15,000 Stowe pay the bills, and joking, take the car. In spite of all that appeal, Fred was constantly anxious. It dances better than my nags. He began experiencing panic attacks after his sister Adele retired in 1932, and doctors diagnosed him with neurasthenia, a nervous disorder. He even fainted during a rehearsal in 1927, and secret medical files revealed in 2019 reveal that he was given barbiturates and early sleep therapy. In 1936, while filming Swing Time, he forced MGM to construct a quiet room specifically for him to unwind in, and he played Hawaiian music repeatedly to help him relax. In 1976, when asked if he still felt nervous before a performance, Fred grinned and replied, "The feet are steel." His wife, Robin, later revealed that Fred always carried a tiny bottle of medication in his tuxedo. Everything above the ankles is custard. A picture of Fred slouched in a chair during royal wedding rehearsals was shot in July 1950. His eyes appeared vacant, and his collar was drenched in perspiration. The famous moment where he danced on the ceiling was going to be filmed, according to a call sheet pinned behind him. Years later, sophisticated scanning showed that the back of that picture had hidden pencil notes that Fred had written. 2 sleepless nights. Jane remains flawless. I'm half a beat off. Donan requests a third take. Freddie, smile, smile, can't. He had even made a cartoon of the spinning chamber, referring to it as a hamster wheel, which demonstrated how exhausted he was in real life, even though he appeared perfect on screen. That picture reappeared in September 2025 after someone shared it on Reddit, and it went viral in less than a day. The world saw a new side of Fred Astaire, less flawless, more genuine. And the shot even prompted MGM to promise a repaired version of the royal wedding for 2026. People claimed he looked human, vulnerable, and tired, and choreographers on TikTok imitated the posture.